So let's get into the podcast today, everyone. Today we have as our guest Jae Gruenke, and Jae has been helping runners from beginner to Olympian since 2003 to improve their running form, efficiency, and injury resilience and avoidance. So, Jae, thank you for being on this show.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks so much for inviting me. It's great to talk to you.
Yeah. So, first of all, you have this. Okay, I'm gonna see if you remember this. In a recent interview with Stephen Sashin, you made a promise to our listeners. Do you remember what that was?
Uh-oh.
You said that when you turned 80, you would take up sprinting.
I might do it before then. I don't know. We'll see. It's definitely what my body wants to do. I was listening to your interview with Pam Reed this morning, or part of it, and just like I'm not really an endurance, let alone an ultra endurance athlete, just by body type, just by genetics. So I would much rather do some speed work or even just some fartlek or whatever than run 10 miles. I feel energized after the short, fast stuff. I feel just drained after the long stuff in not a nice
That's the good part. Yeah, I like 10 miles because look at the ground you can cover through the mountains. It's wonderful.
Oh, yeah, that's the best part about distance running is like you can really get out there. You can really go somewhere in nature.
Yeah.
It's the best.
And when you're older, you can still get out there and enjoy nature.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
if you're a little slower, you're still out there for a few miles, and that's nice.
Yeah.
Sprinting is a little different thing. And I've noticed that has not in the past been your specialty in terms of your coaching.
Right. Well, see, that's what would be very cool about taking it up in a few decades is that I would have a whole new thing to learn.
That's right. And it is, okay, so I had some things where this might go, but you talked about running fast and running slow already. Now, I have watched a lot of comments lately on people doing the Maffetone training method. Now, of course, you don't have to use the Maffetone training method, but I think it has some very, very wise principles in it, which is start out incrementally and pay attention to your health rather than just your goals. So, but in order to do that, the way the training program is set up, with your heart rate 180 minus your age and make your adjustments and so on, you end up running pretty slowly, which is a good way to train your aerobic system. And for a lot of runners, they'll have to do some walking to start with, or maybe a lot. It's very challenging for them. And so I've run into some complaints lately that I've seen online that I never get injured, but when I have to run this slow, I get injured all the time.
Right.
And you talked to William Sichel about his skill he's developed in running slowly, because of course you can't run 1, 2, or 3,000 miles in a sprint.
Right.
And so I know what I think about that, but what would you, can you explain for us why people get injured when they run slowly?
Well, you don't have to get injured when you run slowly, but it's a higher skill than running fast. It takes more skill. And so, that's where that's where the things you need to learn show up, if we're just putting a positive spin on it. There's a lot of nuance in this, because most people feel they run better faster when new clients are getting ready to shoot their video for me to send it over. They always want to video themselves running faster because that's when their form is best, and I say no, because speed hides things. And
yes, it does.
Yeah, and so it's kind of a bit of both. It's you do run a bit faster.
So let's go back to the skill of running slowly then.
Oh yeah, so Right. So running slowly is a higher skill than running fast. And that said, people feel like they run their best fast, and speed does hide certain problems. But if you've got problems that really show up when you run slowly, chances are that when you run very fast, they also show up, but in a different way, which is after the fact, you get very sore, your quads are burning, your hip flexors, and you're really limited by your ability to recover. So it's not it's not that speed fixes everything necessarily. I don't want to create that impression. Speed more hides things. But yeah, if you've got any gaps in your skill, it's going to show up slowly. And then on top of that, I think a lot of people when they do Maffetone, they're also trying to follow the advice to keep the stride rate at 180, to have a quick turnover as if they were running fast. And stride rate is actually speed dependent, and you can get hurt by trying to keep too high a stride rate at a slow pace. So, I think it helps to have the mindset running slowly is going to be more like trotting, like a dog. So you don't want slow, sticky, heavy, or it's going to be like a sort of relaxed kind of samba. But you're going to let your turnover slow down, and a number of other things.
So Jay, I was really aware that each pace almost requires a different skill level. I was also aware that running fast looks better on video. Usually.
It totally does.
and I was aware that people get hurt because they don't know how to run slowly. It's a skill, but I wasn't aware that it's a higher skill. But now it makes sense because I do so much of it that I've kind of I don't get hurt doing it.
Yeah. But, I see. Oh, sorry.
I was going to say the other thing, that heavy sticky, rather than 180 for your cadence, I kind of go by where do I feel the elasticity? In other words, you can get so slow that it's kind of each step is kind of plodding, or you can just go for if I have a long self, not too compressed, not terrified, or trying too hard, then with each step you're going to compress a little bit and then come back to that length, and you can feel that. And as long as your cadence is allowing you to do that, you use your natural elasticity well, then it feels right.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree, and that gets to, great, brings together this sort of stride rate and elasticity thing. I used to recommend the 180 stride rate and a running metronome. Every time I've had to recommend that a person do something intentionally that doesn't appear by itself by doing Feldenkrais lessons, I've always thought, there's something a little fishy about that, but it seems right. And then years later, I've realized, no, it was actually wrong. So because everything that you need for running is something that you can feel in your own body. And you're exactly right. Where the window in which you're elastic isn't this set window of like 3 times a second being compressed and recoiling, which is 180 stride rate. So getting right into the really geeky stuff here. It is speed dependent, and it's dependent on terrain, and it's dependent on footwear, and so many and temperature, and the list probably includes other things I haven't even thought of. And so you're most elastic at the frequency at which your system wants to oscillate, whatever that is for the exact conditions you're running in. And you just need to feel that and get out of the way of letting it happen, rather than getting stuck on it has to be one particular thing all the time. So, yeah. I like your description of what that feels like. I think it's beautiful.
Yeah. So maybe let's digress a little bit and go into your background. And
sure.
I think it's fascinating that you've been involved in movement all your life. And, you know, you mentioned Pam Reed. And I think Pam, everybody has some gift that they bring to the show. And her gift, her energy, I just felt her energy when I was talking to her, so abundant, and her joy in participating in things. And with you, I think that you have had that background in movement all your life, and it's involved things like Pilates, Alexander technique, I think, and of course, dance. And you've done something unusual. I think it's unusual. And that is you learned to be a dancer at a high level as an adult. And a lot of times I think people would say you can't do that, but you did. And I think you, and this is interesting too, because you actually were able to accomplish that, I think, before you really were introduced to Feldenkrais. So you had this gift of being a movement explorer. And you're also very good at, you've done a lot of video analysis of, on your blogs, of the best runners in the world, actually. I was going to say high level, but the very best. And you seem to have the ability to, and I'm sure that your dance background, if it didn't produce your gift, certainly, but I'm sure it helped you with your gift of being so sensitive about you know, what is good movement. So with your dance background, you can really, it seems to me that you can get into somebody's body when they're running, even by watching them a little bit. And I think that you almost put yourself in that position. Oh boy, there's way too much arch in the back, or there's, you know, there's this or that. So we could go a couple directions here. First of all, you obviously have explored movement for yourself in so many ways. And talk to us about being an explorer of movement.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that that's just really been the focus of my life from the beginning. You know, I think, you know, I think it's partially coming off of, you know, what type, or, you know, are you a distance type, or are you a power and sprinting type? You know, I also think there are types of people in terms of where your, where the threshold is between what's conscious and what's subconscious in terms of the feedback from your body. And I've certainly seen that as a practitioner over the many years, and that I would bet that that rings a bell for you too, that some people are just have access to a tremendous amount of detail about what they're experiencing, and other people have a tighter, faster nervous system that takes in less detail and finishes things quicker. I'd like to come back in my next life as that kind of person, because they get a lot done, but but I could never do the work I'm doing if I were that type of person. I've always been a person who's just gotten a tremendous amount of feedback from my body, and found, you know, being in my body and in movement to be the most interesting thing that there is. And so, you know, that led me to, like, I did various activities when I was growing up, but it led me to start dancing early on in college, and just immediately feel like that's what I wanted to do with my life, because that was a way that moving could be my job. And I wasn't even interested in being a performer, though I turned out to like it and you know, have skills for it and ability for it. But it wasn't about the performing to me. It was just about the movement and the opportunity to learn and immerse myself, you know, with every different choreographer and every different piece in a whole different kind of moving. And which is also the great thing about being a modern dancer. You know, you're not locked into a vocabulary the way you are in ballet. So that was, you know, it was a very steep learning curve for me, especially as a woman, because, you know, many times more women aim to become professional dancers than men. So the competition is really steep, and mostly you start at age 8 if you're going to have a hope of becoming a professional dancer as a woman. So I had a lot of catching up to do.
Yeah.
And so
that's why you're, that's why you were extraordinary. That's why you could become a dancer as an adult, is because you had this going on with you. This, I need to understand in my body how this works.
Yeah, and then I just wasn't afraid to try like everything that I came across, and that was definitely how I got up to speed and turned my deficit of like being more than 10 years behind the women that I was dancing with or that I was competing against in auditions for jobs, was by just, doing everything I could find to try and get to know my body better, to be able to fulfill my intentions and movement better, instead of like trying to do good arabesque and having it look like not a good arabesque, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
And then that gave me a pool of learning that's been a huge asset ever since. I didn't just dance. I mean, most dancers do something else as well, but I did a bunch of different kinds of yoga. I did gyrotonics, I did some Pilates. Yeah, I did a bit of Alexander. I did Klein technique. I did, I did release technique. I did everything, that I could come across, just trying to get more tools and better control. And what I learned through that has just been the foundation for everything since then. And it ended up working out really well for me as a dancer because, as people kept saying to me once I finally got my act together and was reasonably competent technically, and a person you could hire, is like I hadn't gotten the personality all trained out of me the way that people who start at age 8 often do. And so, once I made up my technical deficit, I was at an advantage. I think that kind of story is probably something any athlete could relate to.
Yeah. So I worked with a couple of dancers once, and I thought, wow, they're dancers and they're ballroom dancers and swing dancers. And so they've probably got good aerobic capacity. They're athletes. And I took them out for a run, and I found out that wasn't true.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Exactly.
And I had to keep yelling at them, stop, slow down, because they were just killing themselves.
Well, that's
I know you.
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
No.
I was just this connects nicely back to the thing about getting hurt running slowly. Is like a dance. That's a skill that a dancer doesn't have. I mean, especially when you're performing, and you're working at a level of intensity that's way higher than what anybody out on endurance running is doing. And you get used to that feeling of intensity in your body and how to go out and regulate your effort so that you could actually last for a couple of miles is a huge learning curve for a dancer. It's one of the many reasons that dancers generally hate running.
Yeah. It's I know you had some struggles that you actually took up running to improve your dancing and your aerobic capacity, like we just talked about, because dancers' anaerobic capacity is pretty good.
Yeah.
But their aerobic capacity, not only do they have to learn the skill of running slowly and the mindset of running slowly, a little bit slowly at least, but they don't have that aerobic capacity usually.
That's
now,
right.
Maybe some dancers do. I mean, if you're doing tap dance 8 hours a day or something, maybe.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It totally depends on the choreography that you're dealing with. Yeah. And that's exactly why I took up running, is because I started working with a choreographer who was doing pieces in large outdoor spaces, basketball courts, parks, and there were no wings to exit off the stage into to catch my breath. Once we were out there, once that piece started, we were out there and we were moving until it was over a half an hour later, and a lot of it was running, and it was just killing me. So that I was trying to just hang on by the end of the piece. And you do not want to be up on, like, performing in front of people, just like trying to make it to the end of the piece. You want to still be able to make artistic choices, to have enough to not be totally maxed out every time. So I thought, I just gotta start training aerobically. And so that's why I started running, because there was running in the piece, and besides which I hated gyms. So it seemed like the obvious thing to do.
So already your story, even with just dancing, has been a wonderful help to runners, because your process has come out here. And geez, we can talk about, you were able to go a little bit beyond technique, because a lot of times I think with dancers, it's like if you audition for something and you catch on right away, good, you're in. You don't catch on right away, you're out. And yeah, so you were able to have enough inward body and self-awareness that you were able to make up for that and move along. So there's a difference between technique, just go out there and try to copy somebody, or actually work on it until you can feel how to do it well. And you talked about conscious control. Where I want to go is, as you began to run, you couldn't. It was terrible.
It was awful. It felt horrendous. Like at that point, I was a good dancer.
Yeah.
And but I couldn't run. Like it made me really angry, that and frustrated, and and obviously it's a movement problem. It's the kind of problem I love to solve, but I just couldn't believe that I had devoted myself at that point for 10 years to becoming something that's really being able to do things that are really difficult. And yet there was this simple activity, a fundamental human gait, that like in the broadest sense of the term, I was running. It wasn't like I couldn't figure out how to put one foot in front of the other, but I was not running well. I was not running as well as, the majority of the people out just running in the park that I was in. And, as we know, most of those people aren't even running well. So it gives you an idea of how low the level was. And so so then I had begun already to study the Feldenkrais Method, and to train to become a practitioner, because it had saved me from a dance injury. And it was, it was just another level deeper into human movement, and human movement, like as part of being human and not just on a stage. So it was just bigger and deeper and wider, and definitely the direction I wanted to go. And so I used my Feldenkrais professional training program as my laboratory to work out the difference between what I was doing when I ran and what people who looked really graceful and comfortable and skillful were doing when they ran, and close that gap for myself. Which I did. And by the time I was, actually even before I graduated from my Feldenkrais training, I'd gotten to the point where I loved how running felt. And in fact, I preferred it to dancing. And there were a lot of things going on at that time also that just made it very natural to bring my dance career to a close. I was satisfied with what I'd done. I wanted to move on. And so when I became a Feldenkrais practitioner, right away I focused on working with runners and sharing what I had figured out.
So right away there, over and over, we've already mentioned the word skill. Yeah. The skill of running slow, the skill of running fast, the skill of sprinting, which you haven't engaged in too much yet, I guess. Yep. But skill. Now, you said that when you went out to run, you were terrible at it. But you knew that. So, the phrase, in the expert's mind, there are a few options, but in the beginner's mind, there are many. That's a poor quote. But you didn't see yourself as an expert. You were terrible at it, and you knew it. And see that what a foundation that is. Then from there, you can only go up. See, if you consider yourself a dancer, so you're already a movement expert, so you don't need to learn much. And maybe as we go along, we'll blow a few myths out of the water, but we can't do any better than to build on what you've already said, the foundation of skill and your movement exploration. If we ended the interview right here and people listened carefully, they would have just a treasure trove to use. So, let's blow a few myths out of the water as we go, maybe. So I believe that Moshe Feldenkrais had respect for the field of physical therapy. You can catch that in some of his writings if you pay attention, or some of his speaking. But in physical therapy, there is the idea that you can improve your running by strengthening certain muscles. And if you don't run well, you must have weak muscles here and there, especially we can name all kinds of them, especially the glute med is the main culprit, or your abdominals, your core strength, so on. I just read an article by a Dr. Letterman. And it's one I've read before, but I just reviewed it, The Myth of Core Strength.
Yeah, I.L. Letterman. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. Anyway, and he kind of shows that strengthening the transverse abdominis is not more effective than just doing a regular exercise program and so on. And so why does physical therapy help? Well, it helps in so many ways. I've worked in both the outpatient and the inpatient settings. And boy, you know, if I can help somebody get out of bed, that's a lot of support. That's a cool thing. You know, get somebody the help they need. And I'm there, you know, to support them and maybe, you know, give them some cues and so on in terms of physical therapy. And maybe we'll put them on the exercise bike. Hey, they really are weak, some of them, in nursing homes. And, you know, activity is good for them. Or in the physical therapy setting, you know, we've been through all the core strengthening and things like that. But we're gonna base this all on skill. But I know people who only run. I'm kind of that way, except I can get down on the floor and roll around and, you know, explore different things. But I know people who only run, and then the rest of the day they sit at a computer for 8 or 10 or 12 hours a day, and then maybe they try to go out and run. So their movement pattern repertoire is rather limited. And that, because when you run on any kind of terrain, you need to adjust and adapt. And then being stuck in any pattern, if it's your only pattern, if I sat like this all day, never moved out of it, I wouldn't be able to move my neck at all.
Right.
And so you get into a pattern, and nobody is perfect. There is no runner in the world, I don't think, that's perfect. So you stay in that pattern all the time, and that pattern is more likely to catch you in something that leaves you injury prone than if you weren't, you know, mobility in the spine and in the entire self, flexibility in body and mind is helpful. So you take somebody who hasn't moved at all, and the term stretching, you have to really go into the semantics of what that might mean. And you put them in various positions and kind of stretch them around, and they may discover that they don't have very much real world mobility to do any of the things they want to do. Maybe they can't even squat down and take clothes out of the dryer. And so that becomes helpful because you've expanded their movement repertoire, and they're actually skilled in moving and living. But then the idea is there is a correlation between doing all these things and all these strengthenings and improving your running. And there is, but it's a weak link. And Feldenkrais said that now we're back to skill. If your desire is to improve your skill level, then exercise is a terrible idea. If your desire is to improve your skill level, exercise is a terrible idea, because if skill is the goal, then you're wasting a lot of time.
Yeah.
Because any correlation between exercise, if you use your glute meds enough, you might get into a pattern where they get used a little bit. Or if you improve yourself in the gym a lot, you might be able to do so much more and do it a little bit better than the guy who sits in the chair for 12 hours a day. But it might take years to do it. And then the second point is you might end up all those years of effort being disappointed because the connection between exercise and learning is so weak that it may never happen.
Yeah.
And so could you comment on that a little bit?
Yeah. Well, there's a whole lot in there, but the thing that's sitting right on top, I think, is, why is exercise a poor tool for building a skill? Why don't we learn movement from exercise very well? And I think fundamentally because there are few to no feedback loops in exercise.
Yeah.
The only one is I was going to lift this much weight that many times. Did I succeed or did I have to stop one or two early, that's the only feedback loop there really is. And that's not even built into the exercise. That's kind of after the fact. And so then you figure, well, you'd have to either lower your weight or your reps or something next time. But there's no feedback loop on, okay, 3 different ways that I could organize my body to get under that barbell. Which one makes the weight feel lightest, right? Because that's the one that is the most effective, right? That it makes it easiest to lift a given weight. Then you're using your body the way that a better way than the other 2 ways to lift that weight. That's a feedback loop that would lead to movement learning. So lack of feedback loops, lack of variation and variety and exploration. So exactly that scenario, 3 different ways to get under the barbell and lift it up, knees a little more bent, a little less bent. Maybe a trainer is telling you to do that, but that's different from you exploring and feeling, oh, for me, this works better than that, right? You're just following instructions. So again, there's no feedback loop there. You're not listening to your body, you're listening to your trainer. You're not doing things different ways. And then the whole idea that easier means more coordinated is missing. So, I mean, why does exercise help at all with movement? Well, because it probably is introducing some variety into your movement life that was completely missing. Because there is this sort of territory in between the stuff that normally would be part of your life, maybe just running and sitting and, a little bit of house cleaning or whatever. There's some territory in between that and the stuff that you completely don't know how to do. There's a little bit of territory where it's movements that you actually do know how to do. You just, the opportunity just never arises in your life, And so those, if you strength train on those movements, then A, you're doing them again. You already knew how to do them. You're getting strength around doing them. That makes you more likely to bring a little of that into your running or whatever. I mean, I think that's that little zone where you do see some improvement from exercise, where you did know how to do those movements. You just weren't doing them. But there's a whole vast territory of stuff that you've completely forgotten how to do or never learned. Like, you are not going to get in there, except, like an inch a year with exercise. Oh, and sorry, there's even one more reason why the learning effect of exercise is weak, and that's just because the stimulus is so large that it drowns out your body's internal sensations. So we get back to the Weber-Fechner law, which that you can feel a change in the stimulus of about 1/40 the size of the stimulus. So if you're holding 50 pounds of weight, and you make a small adjustment that would, the small adjustment, the change in sensation you get from making that small adjustment is so much smaller than the sensation of being loaded with 50 extra pounds. You can't feel it. And if you can't feel it, you can't learn it.
Yeah, there's no feedback loops unless you put them in there.
Well, and people do, actually, and it's true. Now I'm cutting you off, but I have to, I'm excited to say that
if you actually build them into yourself in your approach to something, then there's a feedback loop. So go ahead.
That's true. And when physical therapists and personal trainers and coaches have been my clients, they've told me that the work that they've done with me has changed how they practice, and that they have started practicing by asking their clients questions rather than giving them instructions. And they get much better results that way. So, just even methodology aside, like, a practitioner of anything can change their approach so that it creates a stronger learning effect within the parameters of whatever. So yeah, that makes a difference too.
So movement exploration. I thought that on our talk the other day, last Friday, that Tom Rankin gave a really wonderful explanation of the Feldenkrais method being a question asking method. So talk about asking questions.
Well, I mean, that's there's no feedback without a question. There's no feedback without the feedback being asked for, and so there can't be a feedback loop, right?
Right.
And there's no discovery. Like I use the map metaphor a lot when I'm talking about improving your self-image with Feldenkrais lessons. So jargon. But so, we have in our brain basically a map of our body. And that map is made by the same method that every map gets made, which is exploration of the unknown,
Yeah.
And so you have to go into the unknown. You have to ask, what's there? And then you take a few steps, and then you ask, what is this? And then you take a few more steps and you ask, well, what if I go this way versus that way? It's an endless process of questioning, discovering the answer, and adding it to the map of what you know. And that's how movement learning works. And so, something that I've been that every once in a while I realize, oh, wait a minute, I should have been saying that all along for the past 20 years. And one of those that just hit me the other day is, a lot of my students are trying, I have an online camp, which is an online course, basically a 6-week course for runners. And I talk in my description of that about you're going to learn the movement patterns that are really important for running from this camp. And then I get a lot of questions about learning those movement patterns and practicing them and whatever. And it finally hit me, what I really need to explain to people is that more so than learning any movement pattern through Feldenkrais lessons, the lessons aren't there for you to learn the movements in the lesson. They're there for you to learn things about yourself. And the things you learn about yourself, you can employ in a myriad different ways. But, what is every other sentence practically in a Feldenkrais lesson? It's a question.
Absolutely. So, yeah, and he did say, and Moshe Feldenkrais did say that in one of the trainings that if you never do these movements again, it doesn't matter.
Right.
Because I'm teaching you how to organize your life. And I think that's, I talk about sport being a metaphor for life, which I think it's a wonderful metaphor. Mm-hmm. And so you mentioned, and you've already mentioned a little bit in this discussion, that you can't just run. There has to be more in your life than just running. That's a hard pill to grasp, isn't it? But in terms of the deeper meaning too, in life, I think it has with me sometimes, and it will show you the truth of that. Sometimes you can't run.
Yeah.
Break something and you probably can't run.
Yeah.
And that's a tough thing, but it's good.
Yeah, I was talking with I had recently 2 conversations with parents about their injured children. And in both cases, it's first injury for the child, a really athletic child, and the child is really struggling with not being able to participate in their sport, and the thing that's really helped both those parents, and we keep having to remind ourselves of it at any age and relearn it at any age, is that, if you're a serious athlete, injury isn't an interruption to being an athlete. It's not a break from it's part of being an athlete. And if you do it right, then you come back better because you learn so much in your injuries, you know. But meanwhile, like while you're injured, if you're recovering, you know, unless it was something horrific like you got hit by a semi and every bone in your body is broken, in that case you're in bed. But anything short of that, you know, your normal running injury, you shouldn't be sedentary. I mean, there's some rehab. Like first, you need some kind of physical exercise because it helps your body's healing process, because it's anti-inflammatory, also because it keeps your mood somewhere reasonable and positive. But there's something you can be doing starting the very next day. You know, and pretty soon there'll be specific rehab for your injury, and there'll be, you know, there's always a lot of learning you can do about why you got injured and about recovering that function through Feldenkrais lessons. You can be very busy, every bit as busy as you were with workouts. Like those are your workouts now. This is the training block you're in, you know? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if you're not in bed hanging on to your life, I've found that most any state I'm in, I'm busy.
Yeah.
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 So, kind of lost my train of
Yeah,
thought.
I know you were going somewhere with that, and I totally threw you for a loop by talking about child athletes and.
Oh, we're into injury here.
Oh, right.
So another place we could go with that, one of the prime causes of injury in athletes, I'm talking not falling off a mountain, but is overtraining.
Yes.
Can you comment on that?
Well, a couple things. First, as you observed earlier, you know, nobody's perfect. Nobody's perfectly symmetrical. Nobody has in every moment absolutely perfect movement. And so there are going to be parts of your body that are getting a little more stressed than others. And that's where actually your training plan is really important. There needs to be enough variety in it. You know, I know you had Michael Crawley on here talking about Out of Thin Air.
Wasn't that cool?
That was, yeah, and I just finished reading that book, and the amount of variety in terrain and type of running and the mountain running and all of that the Ethiopian athletes is a total inspiration, and I hope is expanding a lot of people's thinking. You know, running on different surfaces, doing different kinds of workouts, not always running straight forward. These things vary the stresses in your body so that the tissues can recover. So you're not just digging a deeper hole with every workout, so to speak, especially in the areas that you tend to stress more. And then you need a gradual progressive training plan so that you don't suddenly do something crazy and blow something out. Like these are just like kind of fundamentals for staying healthy as an athlete, given the imperfections of our world and our lives. So that's really important. But then, you know, how much variety, how much ability to handle variety and even conceptualize variety can you bring to an activity? Well, that has to do, again, with like how rich and complex and filled out is your self-image. How many movement options do you know about? You know, and that's where, you know, and how responsive can you be to your environment? And that's where the Feldenkrais method has a tremendous value to contribute. You know, I feel like there are some basic principles, some really important basic principles that are not nearly widely enough known about healthy running form. You know, what is healthy running form? Like I've got a simple list of 6. You know, you need to lean forward from your ankles. You need to have your hip joint over your ankle joint in mid stance. You need to land with a supple leg. You need to have your core in action. You need to have your hands close to your heart, and you need to move your face forward.
Just do all that.
Yeah, just do all that. Right.
Yeah.
But see, but those all emerge. Those are all like just landmarks on a single large whole body action. And I could, on that single whole body action, I could choose different landmarks. Those just happen to be ones that are like handy and easy to talk about and experience. But even given those, like once you zoom in closer, you realize in any given moment, there's no rule about what's right. There's no single correct movement that you need to correctly perform all the time. mastery of running form is ability to sense and respond to the changing conditions of every step.
Yeah. I've really found that, let's say you have your arms up high like this, right? Okay, so maybe that's working for you, right? But if you're rigid about that, maybe the next step, that's not working for you. Maybe you do need to have your hand out here before you fall. Or maybe, and also the physical and mental flexibility to not be stuck in a pattern. Because to shift gears, you're going to do different things with your arms and your body as you shift gears. So you got to be able to shift from one pattern to maybe some other pattern. And that just means that you're not being too rigid about having one way of doing things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You need to build your versatility and bring your own versatility to variety in your training. And then your chances of getting an overuse injury go way down. And your resilience, your ability to nip it in the bud, to recover quickly, goes way up.
Yeah, so absolutely. I sleep really well. I sleep more than some athletes do probably. But so the other day, here's what I found after I retired. I had a lot of difficulty after I had COVID. It took like months and months and months, I didn't have that bad a case of it. And I would say, like a lot of people did, that I've had worse colds and flus. But it just affected my energy for a long, long time. Anyway, so we take up the MAF training and go at it for a long, long time and getting better. And then I found with the MAF training, boy, if you don't go at it too hard, I could do 6 hours of aerobic training a week, which I couldn't do while I was working full time. Then I could do 7, 8, I could do 10. In that progression there, I was feeling, I had so much energy that I can't stand it. And then I did a little more. I did 11 hours of training, 12 hours a week. And then I added to that moving, lifting everything and putting it where it goes and doing all that and doing repair work on the RV to sell it and all of that. And then it was too much. And then instead of feeling like I'm so bursting with energy, I just can't stand it, I was feeling I'm kind of tired. And then as that went on, that wasn't going away, but I'm not injured. And, but my whole body was dead. It was like my legs can't pick up my legs. Nothing hurt. My quads are dead. My glutes are dead. Everything's dead. I'm just don't, no energy. And so the nice thing about it is that you can actually do an awful lot and not get injured, but you're still overtraining. So I eventually had to, take an extra day off. It wasn't too bad because I was kind of paying attention to it. But, and then instead of doing 2 hours, I went out for half an hour. That was nothing more than a warm up. And that refreshed me a little bit. And then the next day I did it only 45 minutes, kind of the same way. And I didn't do any running except for the last couple of steps. And then I felt pretty good. And then I did a little bit more the next day because I knew I was going to take Sunday off. And then I'm pretty much back. But so there's more to pay attention to. And even you're talking about variety there. I'm talking too much.
No, it's great. It's a really interesting story. I didn't know you'd had COVID, actually. So interesting to hear about.
But I can't prove it, but I know it's what it was.
Right.
I was heavily exposed to it. And then I actually got it a second time. About 8 months later. Heavily, I was in a nursing facility and working right in people's faces. But the second time I felt like I was just kind of immune to it because it took like 4 days or 2 weeks or whatever, like a cold, and there was no recovery from it at all. It's just go out and do what you want.
Right.
So anyway, I want to bring in one thing there so that everything matters. I've had times where I was stale mentally. And it's like, I can't run on the road anymore today. I just can't. I don't have it. So you get out in the country and then you can do it.
Right.
And or let's say you haven't had enough sleep, because I had a little bit of stress from everything I had to do when I was, okay, so I like this. You get a new pair of shoes and it's too tight on your feet. That's a stress. You haven't slept well for a week. That's a stress. You have a lot of things to worry about. That's a stress. You haven't had time to eat much for the last week. That's a stress. You've increased your training a whole lot. That's a stress. And maybe your body is more or less handling it, but everything matters. So you could even, I'll get you to comment on this. What are the aspects of taking care of yourself that don't have anything to do with your running form, but do have to do, well, of course they have something to do with it. Right. Because I could say, let's say you were very mentally distraught and had to go into a race. And if that state carried over into the race, what would happen?
Well, I mean, stress is stress. Mm-hmm. It's hormonally, it's all the same in your body.
Yeah.
The stress of overtraining is the same as the stress of money worries or whatever, Yeah. So that's gonna, physiologically, I'd imagine it's gonna elevate your cortisol, but it's just gonna reduce your self-awareness and your resilience and adaptability. And in fact, I just had a classic example of this. My last 2 weeks were extremely busy, and even though I would try not to do this, there was just no avoiding staying up working very late every night. And even on the weekend, I didn't really get to catch up. And the time changed a week ago, so I was also coping with being up an hour earlier, which will throw you off anyway. And my mood was still good because I was enjoying the work I was doing, but I got really, really exhausted. And so finally things lightened up at the end of last week. I got, an okay night of sleep Friday night and was just really excited to go for a run Saturday. I hadn't gone for a run the whole preceding week. I'd just been doing little quick things to get some. And so I'm thinking, I'm going to make this a long one because I haven't run in a while. And I just sort of, then anyway, I was really excited to get out there and be out there for a while. But what did I do at mile 2? I stubbed my right toe, which I had fractured a year ago in a beach accident.
Yeah.
I was running barefoot, which I do, and like everybody worries about glass and running barefoot, but really the one that sucks is stubbing your toe. But I only do it when I'm exhausted. I think I'm paying attention. The thing about fatigue, and being in that state, and this is related to stress, is probably not exactly, but is you don't know, you can't read the label from inside the bottle. I felt fine. I thought I was paying attention just as well as I always pay attention. I was running through an area that was familiar to me. I know the tree roots push up the pavement there. Didn't see it. Just looked up at a bird right at that moment, rammed my toe into the pavement, and hobbled back to my car.
And mile 2.
So, but it just always happens in a moment like that because, when you're underslept, you do not coordinate your movement as well. You can't necessarily tell it, though I was dropping things. I was dropping glasses, and I was just dropping things all week, even though I felt normal. So these deficits, they're just there. And
go ahead.
But you just have to be mindful. And then I was like, after I stubbed my toe, I was like, Jay, you know better. You know better than to go out and be ambitious with your running the day after you had 2 weeks like that. Like it's not like this hasn't happened before, but I fell into, and you should have planned a short, slow run for today, and then tomorrow you could have done more, and you would have been fine. Like you have to be your own parent sometimes, and somehow have enough outside perspective to take care of yourself, even though from the inside you feel fine. Anyway,
that reminds me of my construction days when somebody said, getting hurt It always happens when you least expect it. And that actually happened to me falling off a rough once. I was perfectly comfortable right down by the edge of the rough. And I shouldn't have been so comfortable.
Right.
But, I believe Feldenkrais said, he talked to somebody who was falling or something, and he said, when I was younger, I would fall all the time. Now I pay attention and I never fall. So, so in concluding this part of the conversation, I really do think that in our busy lifestyles that people don't add up their stresses and they don't pay attention to that additive quality of whatever's stressing them at the moment. It might just be working full time and then trying to add a tiny bit to your training. It might be anything. But I think that's another area where awareness could grow.
Yeah, I agree. And you know, and for myself, it's a reason why I don't race. Is because for me, my race and my main is to be a good mom and to run this challenging business. And I know that that's a full stress load for me. And all that I can do running wise is have that be health and recovery time. I can't create a lot of stresses for myself running because I wouldn't be able to recover from them. I would just break down. So
okay, so add one more thing to that. In your interview with William Sichel, who is a world champion at these phenomenally long distances, much more than you consider ultra running. He actually said something that surprised me and maybe could inspire some other runners. And he said he only trained 4 days a week. So that's something to think about.
It really is.
Yeah. What's optimal for you at this stage and what you're doing. And I do find that, say, if you're doing a lot of aerobic training, you add a little bit of speed work or a little bit of higher, just go ahead and do an hour and 20 minutes or something of letting your heart rate rise another 15, 20 beats. That added quite a bit to your week, more than an hour and 20 minutes, even if you only do it once a week. So, yeah. Optimal may be something that surprises you. You may reach your potential more easily by doing less. It's possible.
Yep. Yeah. And there's that deep truth that we don't get stronger from training. We get stronger by recovering from our training, and so that's one of the benefits of doing less or finding that sweet spot for any given person.
Oh, let's go into when you first began to run, it was difficult and unenjoyable. And then you made a transition to improving your skill and having it be more enjoyable than dancing. So that's fun, right?
Yeah.
So what's really fun about an activity? What's fun?
Oh, it's just this feeling of total rapport and oneness with my own body and with the environment.
The environment too, right? That's that adaptability.
Yeah.
Right. So there's fun. And then you're talking about the child injured athletes. So give me a quick comment on the difference between fun and joy.
Oh, let me think. I've never. Well, I think fun relates to flow, right? To this optimal experience, from Mahaya Csikszentmihalyi, this, and if you think about fun that way, as a thing is fun when when your sense of time and space falls away, when you're just 100% engaged with what you're doing, so you're in a flow state, that only happens if the level of difficulty is exactly right. If it's not too much beyond your skill, so that it creates stress in the moment, psychological stress, and it's not, the level of difficulty isn't so low that it doesn't require your full involvement, right? And so difficulty is, and again, I think this is something that athletes can really relate to. difficulty is necessary for that kind of fun.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas joy is an emotion. See, fun isn't an emotion, right? It's an attitude, maybe, but not an emotion, and joy is an emotion, and I think it's so much larger. What could give a person joy? It could be so many things. So
much larger. Yeah, I regard that as a larger term. Yeah. And so there's a lot of examples we could use, but fun and joy, that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
And if you talk to any athlete, they have some element of that in there. It doesn't matter. I talk to a lot of runners, but if you talk to a football player, it's fun. It's fun to play the game. It's joyful, or else they want to retire. It's not worth it. So that's what really makes it worthwhile in life, is those two things. And I think that transition that you made there, and you made it partly through the Feldenkrais method, is a transition that when you experience that, I can't do this and it's not fun, and then you do some learning, and now it's wonderful. Mm-hmm. And I think your ideas about impact, you've mentioned impact at some other interviews, and you mentioned getting over an Achilles injury that you struggled with for a while, and somebody took your hand, and you actually committed to having some impact there, and you found out that impact is your friend. And if we use it correctly, if we use the ground forces correctly. Now, once you get through something like that, I had somebody tell me once, and was actually with a knee problem that was actually a movement pattern problem. And of course, no doctor can help you with that.
Right.
And but I went to a physical therapist who was an ultra runner who had an introduction to Feldenkrais, who you have met before in Boulder, Colorado. And what's that?
Who was the physical therapist?
Well, I'll give a shout out to Douglas Wizoff.
Aha.
Yeah.
Is he a Feldenkrais? He's familiar with the Feldenkrais, but he's not a practitioner, is he?
No, he kind of introduced me to it a little bit. I had read about it, but I couldn't make it work for myself. I didn't understand. And he took me through a couple of brief lessons, and he doesn't understand it the way you might if you took 4 years of training.
Right.
But he did take me into it a little bit. So once you discover, I was going to say, it's an important quote to me. It's an important in this interview, I think, because he said, knees are easy. Well, I happen to know from all my background that your knee is the largest joint in the body in terms of surface area. Yeah.
Interesting.
So it can definitely support you, unless you put all the pressure on one spot. If you do that continually, then you're using a joint that's meant to be the largest joint in your body. You're using it like the smallest joint in your body. You're making it into a very small joint.
Fascinating.
Yeah. It's you might call that a point load in physics.
Right.
But the interesting thing he said is knees are easy working with me. And he said, he also said, if you do what we're learning here, you will get better every time you run. And this is, I think we still have a little bit more to go here that I'd like you to comment on, but you'll get better every time you run instead of worse. Because it's like, he didn't say this, but it's kind of like if you're hitting your hand with a hammer and you stop doing that. Now you feel a lot better instantly. But here's the thing. He also said to me, this is going to feel like a miracle. It isn't a miracle, but it's going to feel that way. And it did. Because, wow, nobody can help you. And all of a sudden, now it's okay. But it's through the learning process. So I really want to give a shout out to you, because I think once you've been through an experience like that with Feldenkrais, you can't help but want to tell other people about it because you see them struggling and you go, hey, here it is.
Yeah.
It can be better fast or slow, whatever works for you, but it can be better. And so I want to give a shout out to you because you've really dedicated yourself. Well, I feel that. I feel, it's helped me so much. I want to share it with other people, but you've done that. You haven't gotten sidetracked and you've really dedicated your life to helping other people with what helped you. So I want to thank you for that.
Oh, yeah. It's I'm one of these dogs that, like, once I get my teeth sunk into something, I don't know how to let go.
In this case, that's a good thing. Yeah, so I appreciate that commitment. So let's say, yeah. So let's move on from that a little bit. And now we know that most people don't know anything beyond physical therapy. I want you to go to your physical therapist, go get it done, have your physical therapy, especially if you broke something, you got to get it moving again, right? And so go get some help. Mm-hmm. But most people, in terms of, you've given us a story here of self-agency. You've inspected and learned and explored some things yourself that nobody could explore for you. And so lost my train of thought a little bit there, but what can you tell people about self-agency? And then, okay, here's the rest of my question. And this might sum us up a little bit, maybe, because there's a lot to talk about. But what can you tell people about self-agency? And how can, I think a lot of patience is involved, but how can you get the message out there that, hey, you have more potential than you think. You could explore these things as I've done, because there's no knowledge of that. And like Rich Goldsand said, don't you know this is the best thing since buttered bread? No, buddy, I don't. I've never heard of this before.
Right. So
how do you comment on self-agency, how important that is, and comment on how do you persist and how do you get this wonderful message out there so that people know, there's more to it, guys. You can do more than you think if you delve into yourself. How do you get that out there when there's a big cloud over that message in terms of our cultural norm? So take it away.
Well, it's funny. I actually yesterday I picked up this book that I've kept and I've moved like all around the globe with, and there aren't many books that I have kept that long and haven't shed. But this one is called "Afterwards You're a Genius" by Chip Brown, and it's actually Chip Brown was I don't know, book is I think from the 80s, 90s maybe. A journalist with the Washington Post. And the book is about his explorations into energy healing. Probably the only book on energy healing out there that has a quote for a blurb from Bob Woodward on the back cover.
Wow.
Anyway,
so Bob was impressed.
It's a great, and their colleagues, it's a great book, and his history of medicine is amazing. It's just a brief, it's like one chapter, but worth the price of the book all by itself. And I just wanted to review that because I wanted to read again about the Flexner Report, which is a whole other subject. But there are so many fabulous quotes from throughout the history of medicine about healing in that chapter. And one of them, and I forget who it's from, it just leapt out at me, and it's something like, it's the job or what's necessary for healing. I'm going to go back and I'll memorize it and I'll have it for my next interview. But the essence is it's not enough to have a solution to or have a way of healing. a problem, what's needed is a way of healing a problem that is acceptable to the culture. And I was like, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. You know, that's our challenge. And that's the challenge for any, you know, and not all Feldenkrais practitioners like to think of this as a healing modality. It's really a learning modality, but the effects are profoundly healing, and that's why a lot of people turn to it. And that's really the challenge that we're up against in so many ways for anything that's defined as outside the box. And Feldenkrais is way, way outside the box in terms of the paradigm, you know? And so for me, the question has always been, like, how can I give people a door that they recognize is a door with a handle that they recognize as a handle, and they know how to turn it to open the door to step in to what the Feldenkrais method can offer them. That's what you need to give people. You can't give them the whole method because they won't be able to make sense of it, you know, in terms of telling them about it or trying to persuade people that they want it, because it doesn't make sense, because it sounds so weird, because it's so different from what their neighbor did that worked. Because how would they explain it to their spouse? Because it's just, I mean, and my clients tell me all the time, you know, about how they're always recommending the balanced run. They're recommending Feldenkrais to their running buddies and their friends, and people just don't act on it. They get so frustrated, you know. And it's just really a struggle for people. And so, you know, my way of handling this has been by trying not to give people too much. I don't give them the whole enchilada. Yeah. Just a door that they can go through. And so that's why I don't promote my business as a Feldenkrais practice. If you look around a little, you'll eventually see that that's what it is. If you start working with me, you'll find yourself doing Feldenkrais lessons, and you'll eventually know what that is. But it doesn't matter. What I'm offering you is the ability to run the way you do in your dreams, or the way you did when you had that perfect run when you were a child, where you felt like you almost like you were flying and like you could just run forever. You know, every runner has that dream, or has had that experience and wants to recapture it. And we don't need to use the Feldenkrais word about that's how we're going to get there. We don't need to put that on the front door, because that isn't going to help anybody open that door. It needs to be, so I talk about running form, which is really where movement learning and coordination meets running, you know. At that intersection, we call it running form. And so that's what I say I do. And that's really the name of the game. Until all the riches and beauties that the Feldenkrais method can give you become more familiar and socially acceptable. And that's probably not going to be in our lifetimes. But I think, you know, it's all about a door that people know how to open.
It's wonderful. It is. And the book is Afterwards You're a Genius?
Yeah, I got it right here.
And, you've got it right there.
Yeah,
you know, there it is. Afterwards You're a Genius. I'm going to have to get that. But, you know, there's... you don't need the Feldenkrais word, because you don't need Feldenkrais at all.
Right.
But it's a powerful, powerful tool.
That's right.
But you don't need it. But everybody knows the term pay attention. And everybody's been aware. How are you the first day on a new job? Well, you're trying to soak in everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you don't want to be any uncomfortable any longer than you have to. But a door to open. That's awesome. I think that's probably a good place to go ahead and end. So Jae, where can people get a hold of you?
You can find me at balancedrunner.com. So, and if you want to try some of my work and begin to get to know what good running form feels like, instead of just filling your head full of ideas about running form that are not easy to take action on, actually, I would recommend my Mind Your Running challenge. It's a free challenge, 10 minutes a day for a week. So you can find that if you go to any blog page. If you're on mobile, scroll down to the bottom of the blog post and you'll see a little widget that has a green button that says Start Here. And if you're on a computer, you'll see it on the right-hand side. Give that a try, and that'll get you started. And then there's tons of blog content. And I also have a YouTube channel, youtube.com/balancedrunner. And so there's a ton of information there as well.
All right, thebalancedrunner.com and the Mind Your Running Challenge, which you can easily find on the balancedrunner.com page.
Yep.
All right, well, thank you, Jae.
Thank you so much, Scott. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
I have too.